So I like to come up with some insane goals. One of my first insane goals was I said, hey, I'm gonna try to make $1 million in a year. I know it seems impossible. I know that seems insane, but I'm gonna see if I can do it. I tried, I spent a year working my butt off and I failed. I did not make it to $1 million, but I did make it to 147,000. Another one of my crazy goals was to be a big famous YouTuber. I wanted to be a full-time YouTube content creator. People thought I was a little bit crazy when I had this goal, but now I have 130,000 followers and I call that a success. My next goal is 2 million followers. I think I'm gonna get there. It's crazy, it's insane, but I'm a big believer in crazy and insane goals. But the fact is, most people aren't big believers in insane goals. Most people are believers in realistic goals, goals that are accepted by society, goals you can tell your mom, goals you could tell your friends, goals you could tell your grandma, and they'll look back at you and say, that seems like a realistic goal. Because in our society, unless you're under the age of 10, it is not socially acceptable to have crazy, impossible, life-changing goals. If you do, most people will be quick to save you by telling you that your goal is unrealistic, it's impossible, it's unachievable, and that you should orient yourself toward a more realistic, socially acceptable goal. You might want to be a movie star and they'll point out how many actors never make it. Maybe you want to be a famous musician and they'll point out how there's no money to be made and you'll end up being a starving artist. Maybe you want to start a billion-dollar company and they'll point out how 95% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. And if your goal is to make $1 million, they'll say, well, why don't you start out trying to just make 50,000 first? These people are well-meaning. They genuinely want to help you. They genuinely want to see you succeed, and they genuinely believe having crazy, unrealistic goals is a bad thing because it's just gonna disappoint you. You're just gonna be so disappointed when you don't achieve this crazy goal. But the fact is, if you come up with a realistic goal and then end up achieving that goal, you're gonna be disappointed by that. Realistic goals are excuses to give up and settle for less. That's what they are. People don't want to call them that, but that's what they are. They're excuses to give up and settle for less. And realistic goals don't motivate you. We're not motivated by mediocrity. We aren't motivated to get out of bed and conquer the day to go achieve what is average. You're not gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm so just pumped and excited today to go make a minimum wage. I'm so pumped and excited today to go conquer the day so that I can live an average existence. And in my experience, that was one of my biggest issues. I did not have the power to go conquer the challenges I had to conquer when it came to like, hey, I'm gonna make $50,000 a year. But when I set my goals to like crazy high, where I said I'm gonna make $50 million by the time I'm 35, that motivated me. I got out of bed and I'm like, I'm gonna go do the impossible today. I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna have my cup of coffee, and I'm gonna go make things happen that everyone says are impossible. Because if I get there, the payout is insane. If I become a famous YouTuber, that is gonna change my life. If I make $1 million in a year, that is gonna change my life. But if my goal was like, hey, my goal is to make $5,000 this year, guys, I wouldn't have done all the crazy stuff I had to do. I wouldn't have been cold calling people, 50 people in a row. It was really hard to do all those things. And I did it because I had this big payout at the end of it. I had this big result. I had this big challenge in front of me. And that challenge gave me the ability and the energy and the strength to overcome all the obstacles that were in my way. And that's another thing. Realistic goals don't grow you. They allow you to stay in your little comfort zone. They allow you to be super, comfortable in your little area where you're like, oh yeah, everyone could achieve this. Everyone could do this. They don't push you. They don't challenge you. They don't cause you to wake up at the crack of dawn so you can push yourself to achieve your goal. But insane goals do. Insane goals, you have to push yourself. You have to grow because what you're trying to do is way above average. It is impossible. And if you want to even have a chance of achieving that goal, you have to push yourself to the limit. And what I've learned through this entire process of trying to make $1 million in a year, trying to grow a YouTube channel, trying to grow a TikTok account, is that you often land where you aim. And it is near impossible to land somewhere you didn't aim. So if you're aiming for $50,000 a year, you're aiming for $100,000 a year, yeah, you might get there. That might be possible, but you're not gonna get to $1 million a year. You're not gonna get to $10 million a year. You're not gonna have that job as a Hollywood actor. You're not gonna start that $1 billion business because you weren't aiming there. But if instead, let's say you did aim for that $1 billion business, maybe you don't hit the $1 billion mark. Maybe you only hit the $50 million mark or the $10 million mark, but are you gonna be disappointed if that's the result? Or are you gonna be stoked right? Aim for the moon, land among the stars is a real thing. And that has to do with the fact that if you're trying to make $1 million in a year, you have a lot of options that just immediately get deleted, right? You can't go make $1 million in a year working a minimum wage job. That's just not an option. So you already have to skip that. You can't make $1 million in a year doing something that you've already been doing, because those things obviously didn't make you $1 million in a year before. You have to put yourself outside your comfort zone. So you're really zoning in on only the ideas that could possibly get you to $1 million in a year. And that's some of the magic behind how it actually functions, and why I was able to make $147,000 in a year is because I was aiming so high that I'd narrowed my focus to only a few different options that would allow me to make $1 million in a year. And coming up with an insane goal doesn't automatically mean you're going to succeed on any level. It just gives you a way higher probability because you're weeding out mediocrity. You're weeding out the things that won't get you there. You can spend your whole life, if you have just like no focus, right? You have this broad idea of like, I'll just see where I end up. You can spend your whole life just in mediocrity, in these mediocre ideas. That's where all your time is devoted. But if your time's devoted there, you never get a chance to explore the crazy, awesome ideas. And there's a reality, something that I've learned and something that I've heard from a lot of successful people is that it's pretty much just as easy to make $1 million as it is to make 50,000, right? If you're starting a business and you're like, I want to start a $5 million business, I want to start a $10 million business. It's not really that much more difficult to start a $10 million business as it is to start a $24,000 a year business. People think it is, but both are actually just really hard, and both are just different areas where you're aiming. And really, in the long run, it's going to be a lot easier to do that $10 million business because you're not going to be struggling to pay the bills. You're not going to be struggling to just barely cover wages. You're going to have an abundance of money to cover a lot of your problems, so it's going to make things a lot easier. And there's a reality that there's just a lot less competition at the top. When you're aiming for average, you're aiming for what everyone else is aiming for. So you're competing with most people because that's what average is, right? But when you aim for above average, for 1%, well, then you're competing with far less people because far less people believe that's possible, and so far less people are going for it. But everyone believes this is realistic and possible. So when you're aiming for that middle zone, you have to fight against literally everyone. If you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense. If most people are competing for the same things, it's much more competitive. The problem is most people don't believe that they can. They don't believe that it's even possible. And on top of all those things, the worst part about having realistic goals versus having insane goals is the fact that I've seen so many of my friends, so many people that I grew up with that settled for average, and they went from these crazy, awesome, excited people to these husks of themselves where they're just going through the routine. Their eyes are slowly getting like baggier, and they look more and more tired every time I see them. All the joy, all the adventure, all the challenge from life has been drained from them because they're not really going for anything. They don't believe they're capable of anything. They have settled for mediocrity. It doesn't even matter if you hit your insane goal or get anywhere close. It's about the challenge. It's about pushing yourself. It's about that energy and that life that keeps you going and keeps you motivated and keeps you pumped. You know what? My YouTube could have never taken off. I could have 5,000 people watching this right now, and I'd still just be as pumped because I'd be aiming for the 50,000. I'd be aiming for the 500,000. I'd be just excited to be facing a challenge and know I have the potential, the possibility that if I work really hard, if I push myself and I keep growing, I could end up going somewhere. That is what keeps you going. That's what keeps you alive and motivated and just full of energy. And when you give up on that and you settle, and you say, I'm just gonna settle for what I got. I'm just gonna settle for this lame job that I hate. I'm just gonna settle for this situation that I don't like. I'm just gonna settle for, bad relationships and this and that. When you give up, it has consequences, and you're gonna watch all that joy and that passion you had in life just slowly drain away, because I've seen it time and time again. I bet you know people that you've seen, if you're old enough, if you're at the point in life where you can look back and see how people progress through life, I guarantee you know some people who, like, when they were younger, were just full of energy, full of life, and then things didn't end up going their way. They ended up settling for just average. They're not pushing themselves, they're not motivated, and they just seem like such a sad person or such a husk of themselves. You don't want to end up as that person, and the way you don't end up as that person is you keep pursuing the impossible. You keep pursuing your goals. You set goals for yourself in the first place. It's about the journey. It's not about the destination. That's a really stupid, cheesy thing that people say, but it's super true. Like, it really is about the journey. And fulfillment comes from that adventure, from that unknown, from not knowing what's gonna happen tomorrow, right? I get so excited every day because I'm like, man, you know what? What if I wake up tomorrow and one of my investments has gone through the roof? It usually doesn't. Maybe it's gone down. I don't care because you know what? It went down, but I'm gonna learn better. I'm gonna get better, and I'm gonna do better next time. Hey, you know what? My YouTube channel is not growing the way I want it to, but that's okay because I'm gonna keep getting better. I'm gonna keep pushing myself. I'm gonna focus on my content. I'm gonna craft and hone my skill set over a lifetime. I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna keep pursuing my goals, and that is what motivates me. That's what keeps me energetic. That's what keeps me alive. I wasn't always this person. I wasn't always this motivated and always this like, I could crush this, I could conquer this, I could do this. I became that throughout this process. I became that after pursuing a goal, failing, and realizing that I really didn't care if I failed. It didn't stop me. It didn't slow me down. I enjoyed the process of failing because it meant I could keep trying again. It meant that I needed to push harder. It meant I could see what I was made of. And I learned what I was made of. I learned I was a lot stronger than I thought I was. I learned I could do a lot more than I thought I could. I have so much more confidence in myself. Like, it doesn't matter what situation you put me in, I'm gonna succeed because I've learned that I'm capable of success. I'm capable of doing things that other people say, you can't do that. And I say, watch me do it because I'm about to do it. The person I've become is what I consider the most valuable part of this entire journey. But I wouldn't have become this person if I would have stayed comfortable, if I would have settled for average, if I would have focused on realistic goals, if I would have said, you know what, like $1 million in a year, let's be real. I've never made $1 million. I'm not gonna make $1 million in a year. My focus is going to be $50,000 in a year. I'm gonna make $50,000 in a year. Watch me follow along for the journey. For one, nobody would have been even interested in that content because they'd have been like, yeah, it's not unusual to make $50,000 in a year. I wouldn't have called 50 people a day. I wouldn't have pushed myself. I wouldn't have learned all these new skill sets and all these new things because $50,000 a year isn't a goal that's gonna motivate me. It's not something that's gonna just really get me fired up to go accomplish it. And in reality, I probably would have ended my entire year making somewhere closer to around $20,000. I can guarantee I wouldn't have made it to 147,000 because I just wouldn't have had that motivation to push myself. A lot of the money I ended up making was because I took big risks that I wouldn't have been willing to take if the prize was super small. But because the prize was massive, because there was a lot on the line, because I'd put myself out there and said, hey, I'm gonna do this, guys. And people really believed that I could, I took big risks. I did crazy things. And some of those things ended up backfiring. And some of those things were disasters. But some of those things actually worked. And I made it a lot farther than I think most people believed that I was capable of. And I definitely made it a lot farther with YouTube than most people thought I was capable of. Challenge is a good thing. It motivates you, it drives you, it puts that skip in your step, it gives you that energy, and it gives you the motivation to conquer everything that's in your way. When it comes to your relationships, your life, your health, whatever, it gives you that motivation to say, hey, I am somebody who loves challenge. I thrive in challenge. I thrive when obstacles are in my way. That isn't something that stops me. It's something that motivates me to push harder. And when you become that type of person, you grow, you change, and it's amazing. It's awesome. And you'll be so pumped every day you wake up. You'll be like, just today's amazing. I'm so excited to be me. I'm so excited to be awake and to be alive because it's another day that I can go out and become a better version of myself. It's another day I can go out and grow and conquer the things that are in my way and forge new relationships, forge new paths. And you know what? My future life's gonna be better than today because I'm constantly growing and pushing myself. If this video is helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments or just wanna say something, let me know in the comments below. I try to at least read every single comment and respond to as many as I can. And if you wanna see more videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to it to be notified each time I release a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.